What's up, fuckers? It's your boy Jack Slack, Fights Gone By podcast, and we got some fights. Yes, not bad fights actually. I was saying this a couple of weeks ago, but this Overeem versus Rozenstruik event, not bad. Let's start out with a bit of news. I suppose the most high profile, I don't know, is it high profile news, is that Corey Anderson versus Jan Blachowicz is now official. They're going to be doing that, presumably to decide a number one contender, or they'll do Jones versus Reyes and then have a number one contender in line. Because we need people to fight John Jones, basically. Until they can do that Israel Adesanya fight that we're all so desperately teasing. Elsewhere, Rodtang versus Haggerty was signed as a rematch. That's going to be going down on January 10th. So very quick turnaround on that one. Like the Cowboy-McGregor fight, just announced and then you're straight into it. Enjoy that quite a lot. If you didn't see the first one, banging fight. You've got Haggerty, who is just a master technician. He can kick wonderfully off the lead leg going backwards. And then you've got Rodtang, who's just the Iron Man of Muay Thai. He just walks people down. And then in the sort of less impressive column, we got Diego Sanchez is signed to fight Michel Pereira, a guy who gassed himself out doing backflips, you'll remember. And that's going on in New Mexico, because obviously Diego Sanchez, New Mexico. And Diego Sanchez has signed another 5-fight deal, apparently. So going to keep fighting until he dies in the cage, basically. And then Holly Holm versus Raquel Pennington 2 was signed. Who gives a fuck about that? And then Jiri Prochazka is going to be defending his Rising light heavyweight title against CB Dollaway. Fun enough. That's your lot for news. Let's look at this card. So I suppose, we'll start the main event. Alistair Overeem versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Rozenstruik obviously coming off a knockout of Andrei Arlovski. And if they want to build you as a monstrous knockout artist in the heavyweight division, you remember what they do. They give you Arlovski and Overeem. Maybe Arlovski first and Overeem second. Maybe Overeem first and Arlovski second. It's the standard practice. They did it to Ngannou when he was coming up. You've got this big puncher. How do we make him look absolutely monstrous? Put him in with these guys with glass chins the two of them have been knocked out more than 10 times each. In MMA, that is. Overeem's got a kickboxing record as well. So that's the plan. I mean, obviously, there's an awful lot that can go wrong for Jairzinho Rozenstruik here. His fights have been weird in the UFC. His first fight was against Junior Albini, the big baby from Spirited Away. Albini just sort of stuck to him and took him down effortlessly over and over again, kept getting on top of him, and then would lose it. There was a moment where he took Jairzinho's back and then was going to come up into mount, and he lost it, and I couldn't work out how he lost it. He was controlling the hand. If you're going up onto mount, you want to control the hand on the opposite side so that they can't just push your knee back into their guard. And he had it all there, and he just sort of fell off the dude. It was really weird. So I wasn't sure how he fucked that up. But then the second round, he comes out, throws a couple of punches. Jairzinho throws an uppercut, stands him up and hits him with a left hook, and then head kicks him on the way down. It wasn't even like an amazing counter combination. You weren't looking at it going, Jesus, he's fast, or looks powerful. He just caught him and then knocked him out. And to be fair, Albini just sort of shelled up in a ball. He wasn't starched unconscious. But then Aaron Crowder comes out and immediately runs across the cage to try and jab Jairzinho, and Jairzinho catches the jab in his right hand and fires back his own jab, basic boxing 101, and knocks Crowder down, and Crowder just sort of looks up at him as his legs have gone, and Jairzinho jumps on him and pounds him out. So that was two fights that were just super bizarre. And then Andrei Arlovski comes out and does exactly the same thing. Andrei Arlovski, who never jabs, steps in with a deep jab, gets countered with a jab, and then he stepped onto it again and got knocked out. And it's listed as a counter left hook, but it was basically just a little thrust of the fist as Arlovski was walking forward, turned his chin because, Arlovski hangs it out there, and Arlovski face plants, goes down face first like he'd been shot. It was proper weird. Yeah, so in 3 fights we've learned basically nothing about him except that you can grapple all over him, and he will try and time you with a counter jab if you jab at him. So in some respects that'll be interesting because obviously Alistair Overeem, one of the most technically skilled heavyweights, and one of the scariest heavyweights, physically, but also prone to shitting the bed, especially against big punches. The ones we always bring up are Mark Hunt. He fights a perfect fight against Mark Hunt, looks absolutely fearless, but does all the right things. He's always all the way in or all the way out, just completely shut Mark Hunt out while beating him up. and then he'll come out against people like Ben Rothwell and Francis Ngannou, and he'll be running in the opposite direction while trying to throw punches. Or Sergei Haratonov, the second fight, was a great example. He handled him in the first fight comfortably, and in the second fight he seemed terrified of him. It was very strange. So I think like every Overeem fight, I can see about 8 different ways he could win it with the skill set he's got, and I can see one way that he'll lose it, and I'm still erring on the side that he'll lose that. Especially with his like shifting left uppercut, left hook, whatever he does with it, cheap punch, whatever you want to call it. But he does that a lot, and it's a long distance lunging thing, and he also gets in the habit of like stepping right hands. Both of those could run him on to just that counter left straight, the counter jab, and stand him up for following punches. It'd be interesting to see what he can do at long range, because Overeem is obviously a very good kicker. Certainly more in recent years, he's been doing the Econo-Reem thing, which is where he circles the ring and stands southpaw and then body kicks you. And it works really well. I mean, he almost finished Stipe, or did finish him, if you believe he tapped. And that's how he knocked out Junior Dos Santos, back when Junior Dos Santos was still very much one of the top heavyweights in the world. And he beat Andrei Arlovski like that too, with a weird crane kick to the face. So as much as Rozenstruik is billed as having like 80 kickboxing matches, I'm not entirely sure that they're of the level of the kickboxing matches that Overeem did when he went to K1. But then equally, Overeem's running K1 was a lot of throwing people and holding in illegal situations. I think Overeem's best course of action in this one would be similar to the Sergey, what's his name? Similar to the Pavlovich fight. Just be sensible, push him to the clinch, beat him up with knees there. Do some kicking at long range, but don't put yourself at risk too much. And then if you can get the takedowns on the fence, just hold him in the closed guard and elbow him. You don't need to pass. What's it called? Junior Albini getting all the way past and onto Jairzinho's back just gave him the chance to roll over into closed guard. Get into side control just gave him the chance to bridge off the fence and turn into him and come up onto his knees and then up to his feet. If you are in the closed guard, which is what Overeem did against Struve, and I think he did it to Mir too, did it to Pavlovich as well. You have a good amount of control over whether they can stand up or not, because if they go to stand up, you can just pull their legs out again, complete a double from your knees, basically. And also, like, not a lot of guys are good at hitting technical stand-ups from closed guard. They're more into wall walking, so if you press them against the fence, you might be able to do that. But again, heavyweights, really not great at moving their hips. If you see heavyweights get out from underneath, it tends to be like a higher stakes situation, like the Derek Lewis stuff, where he'll stand up from the bottom of side control and so on. It's less the technical stuff you see in the lower weight classes, where you put yourself in a better position and then you work your way back up. I mean, honestly, the way that Overeem loses and the inconsistency of his career, Rozenstruik beating him here wouldn't tell me much about Rozenstruik, unless Alistair Overeem's fighting the absolutely beautiful fight and Rozenstruik's still beating him. Yeah, I think this is one where it's like, here you go, Overeem, headline an event for a start, but if you win this one, you're on a 3-fight winning streak, we can put you back into title contention without much embarrassment. And if you lose, it'll be by knockout, and this guy is already being billed as a monstrous knockout artist. I would rather say, look at my amazing knockout artist, than look how bad the heavyweight division is that Alan Crowder ran onto a jab and got knocked out in 9 seconds, and then Andrei Arlovski did the same thing. Well, that's more attention than that fight deserved. Cynthia Calvillo versus Marina Rodriguez. Don't know much about Rodriguez. Have watched Calvillo. Fair enough. Yep, good fight. Stefan Struve versus Ben Rothwell. Welcome to 2012, everyone. Stefan Struve coming back from another retirement, I believe. And Ben Rothwell on a 3-fight losing streak. Also had 2 cancelled fights with Fabricio Verdum in there because he got injured and then he tested positive for whatever it was. Is that the second time that's happened? I can't remember, but it's weird. He had a little career resurgence there with the funky movement against Brandon Vera, knocked out Overeem when Overeem was doing that weird running windmilling performance, and then he legit beat Matt Mitrione and Josh Barnett by a wicked 10-finger guillotine. I think he called it a go-go choke, because go-go is Adam's apple in Portuguese, or Brazilian Portuguese, whichever. Yeah, here's the thing. I like Ben Rothwell. I kind of like Stefan Struve. They both follow me on Twitter. They're all right guys. But Struve is incredibly frustrating for the obvious reason. I think we talked about it 1,000 times before, but even if you've never heard me talk about it, you've heard someone talk about it, because it is just the constant theme. For everyone who points at John Jones and says, yeah, but he only wins due to his height and reach. And I've seen people say that about Israel Adesanya too, and I'm just like, what are you talking about? Have you met Stefan Struve? And Stefan Struve has tried, at least. He went and trained with Semi Schilt for a while, and that was always the thing. We were going, you live in Holland, they have the best tall fighter of all time, and you are both of freakish height, not even like rather tall. You're both literal giants. Go and train with him. And he did, and he occasionally showed like a little front kick, almost as sort of a shout out to Semi Schilt, but really all of Struve's best work on the feet has been done with a long right uppercut, which looks like shit, but has caught a fair few guys. And he knocked out Miocic with that, even though he thumbed him in the eye first. Well, fingered him in the eye, not thumbed. My thing about Struve was always, like, I gave up on him using his reach a long time ago. So I was like, why don't you just try and take these guys down? Because he has a really good ground game. Certainly from the bottom, he has a very good ground game. He dasked that lad a couple of years ago. Arm triangle a dude in his last one, which I can barely remember, to be honest, even though it happened in February. But prolonged fights on the feet aren't his forte, because he just walks in too far and he gives up his reach, is how he described it. You can go back to fights with he's had a lot of fights. You can go back to fights with Junior Dos Santos and Roy Nelson, Travis Brown, even against guys like Dave Herman and Sean McCorkle. He would just step in on top of them, and they'd either grab his hips and take him down or hit him in the face, from a range where his punches were awkward and loopy with the elbows out, and theirs was straight to the target. But the problem is that he's never really had great takedowns either, so he's just sort of a mishmash of parts that don't work too well. However, Ben Rothwell, a very mercurial character. I made a video on him a little while ago on my original YouTube channel before I rebranded the YouTube channel, but it was called Ben Rothwell Defensive Genius, and it was tongue-in-cheek that I said that, but since then people have been like, oh, didn't he say that Ben Rothwell's a defensive genius? Because there is no room for subtlety in the modern world. People are just really fucking stupid. But he was doing this sort of like mummy guard thing, which I liked, because he's not the quickest guy in the world, he doesn't have the best reactions, but he does hit hard. And by having his palms out there, he was able to parry a lot of stuff through the window in front of him and get in to try and grab the head and uppercut, or just come back with a right straight. Land the power punches that aren't particularly pretty, but get in there and do it anyway. I think this is Rothwell's fight to lose, because the book on Struve is so thoroughly written that it would take either Struve doing something he's never done before, or Rothwell actively ignoring the openings that are there all the time. Because Stefan Struve is going to come out, he's going to throw some high kicks, which is going to be your chance to block him and step inside. He's going to maybe throw some front kicks, which you can parry across yourself and step in on him. And then he's going to try and punch with you, and you're going to be able to punch him in the head. So, it's, I think this is, really, it should be Rothwell's fight, but we'll see. He's frustratingly inconsistent with when he's good, or when he's technical and smart. Having said that, he's coming off a 3-fight losing streak, but the Junior Dos Santos one was an ass kicking, but he should have won that Blagoy Ivanov one. And the UFC aren't giving up any good heavyweights anytime soon, because you don't want Bellator having them to use as, fodder for Ryan Bader. Aspen Ladd versus Yana Kunitskaya, I quite like that. I've always been a fan of Ladd because she's got a mean streak that you don't see, certainly a finishing streak that you don't see in a lot of women. Though once you notice that she gets stoppages by screaming while performing ground and pound, and isn't always hitting them when she's doing it, she's just screaming over the top of it, and the referee goes, oh my god, she's going to kill this lass, stop it. Because women's MMA, the same refs make terrible stoppages when it's women fighting. It's incredible. Once you notice that, it's a little bit disappointing, but I do like her moxie. She does go after it, and she's good on the ground. There was the Shajara Eubanks fight. She was using a guillotine to try and roll Eubanks or submit, and that was really good. Tonya Evinger was a good fight too. Yeah, good top player, good passer, and actually hammers in the elbows, which we really like. Hands looked sloppy as fuck against Tajara Eubanks. I mean, she's got this interesting sort of like, she does jab, and she does like counter jab, and she actually can fluster people who are on paper much better strikers than her, but she is also, it's that thing we say where like, learning to get on the front foot and not be scared really improves fighters very quickly. That's what happened with all the guys who go to Rafael Cordeiro, because he just has them kick the shit out of each other. Verdum, Benil Dariush, people like that, who were grapplers, suddenly very confident strikers just by getting on the front foot. Not technically beautiful, but very confident against much better technical strikers. But she's got that the downside of that confidence, of course, is if you're leaving your chin up in the air, you're going to get clocked. And that's what happened against Jermaine Durandamy. Of course, there were some other complicating factors in that fight. That she tried to cut like 50% of her fucking body weight. The girl makes a ridiculous weight cut. Commission said that they were going to change the rules and start checking. I think she was banned from future performances in California without being able to prove that she's doing a healthier weight cut. But this fight's in Washington, so it doesn't even matter. Meanwhile, Yana Kunitskaya, I was going to say tall lass, but she always looks tall. Obviously, she's 5'8", but she's not like Megan Anderson tall, it's just that she fights people who are considerably shorter. And Aspen Ladd, I always think of her as quite a big, well, she is a big bantamweight, but she's about 5'6". So, Kunitskaya still got the height advantage. Interesting enough striker, had a good little scrap with Lena Landsberg a little while ago. I can't remember much of the Marion Renault fight, but I seem to remember she's another sort of like key eye on every punch fighter. I think this one's pretty obvious. Yana Kunitskaya wants to stay on the feet and apply the craft, and Aspen Ladd wants to either rough her up on the feet, make it ugly, without getting cold cocked while she does it, or get her to the mat and elbow her face off or guillotine her. Now we're into the good fights. In the middle of there's a creamy centre to this card, and it's probably the ones I'm going to watch and then fuck off for the rest of it. Then I'll watch the other ones later. But we got these two bantamweight bouts, which I'm really quite excited for. Cody Stamen versus Song Yadong. Taught a lot of people last week that the Stamen is part of a plant, and Yadong is part of me. Wait, no, not your dong. My dong is part of me. Your dong's part of you. Unless you're one of the 1% of the audience that are female. Ladies. I like this fight a lot. I enjoyed Cody Stamen back when he fought Brian Caraway. That was a really interesting fight because Stamen had the striking and the wrestling, whereas Caraway had this gorgeous guard passing but was also doing stuff off his back. So you had Stamen in this area where he was like, don't want to take him down and get stuck there working in his guard, but also do want to take him down. It was very strange, but that was back in 2018. That was September. And then he hasn't fought since he fought Alejandro Perez in March of this year, which was a decent fight, but and he got the decision in that one, but he got the decision against Brian Carey, but the trouble he had was that Alejandro Perez was stopping his takedowns really well. It was actually Stamen's left hook that surprised me in a positive way in that fight. And in between that, of course, he lost to Aljamain Sterling by silhouette stretch. So not quite at the elite level yet, like the elite level. But he was booked to fight Rob Font in June, which would have been a great fight. And Rob Font is on this card too. So, it's these four really interesting bantamweights going back and forth here. But Song Yadong is certainly got more hype coming into this. Really young guy, like 22 years old. He's already got over 20 fights. And I think he fought some Sanshao or Sander too as well. But he's been training with Team Alpha Male and improving his wrestling there. He's they call him the Kung Fu Monkey or something like that. He's a Sanshao fighter or Sander fighter, in the same sense that a lot of these guys are, where they come out and show one exciting kick and then it's back to just, wrestling and boxing. That's what we do. Obviously, he's had a couple of amazing stoppages in the UFC. The most recent one against Perez was a beautiful right-hand counter. I think Perez was kicking at the time, but he'd been looking for to slip inside of Perez's jab and hit him with the right hand several times up that point. And the Felipe Arantes one where he elbowed him, but and he choked a guy in his first fight in the UFC. I forgot that too, but he's rounding out his game really nicely. a big hitter for the class, and just a really strong little tank. So I think it'll be very interesting because some of these fights he's used his takedowns to just sort of show that I can take people down and win fights there. But Cody Stamann, probably going to be very difficult for him to take down. Could end up more of a striking match. Obviously, Stamann good on the takedowns, so might dissuade Yadong from using kicks too heavily. I think obviously the big counter right hand it should be the main worry for Stamann, but I could see Stamann bringing his left hook to lever in this fight. It is pretty sharp. And Stamann has a decent kicking game when he actually goes to it. I mean, he trains, I think he's coached, or certainly he was cornered by Darren Cruikshank in a couple of his UFC fights. So obviously has that in his back pocket, some cool karate shit. But yeah, I don't know what to expect in this one. I think we're all expecting Yadong to rumble on towards title contention. He's a little he's a little Chinese Zabit, but I think Cody Stamann has the. I'm not going to say he's going to knock him out of nowhere or anything like that, but I will say that I could see this fight hurting Yadong's image a little bit because Stamann could be very tricky for him, even if he loses. But then I would have thought that about Alejandro Perez, and he just starched him off the bat. So, and then Rob Font versus Ricky Simone is another great one. Ricky Simone, obviously, in the career in a bit of a slump at the moment because he had a really good fight against Rani Yahya or Hani Yahya, where I was going, oh my god, I love everything this guy's doing. He's slipping punches, pivoting out behind the dude. He's hitting him with uppercuts in the chest whenever Yahya steps in. He was doing tons of interesting. He was using reactive takedowns to catch Yahya swarming in on him. He was just doing a marvelous job. And then they booked him to fight Uriah Faber, and I said, do you know what? I think this guy is possibly the best ranked opponent who's a stylistically favourable matchup for Faber because he does stand so square on and he gets hit with overhands in most of his fights. And then immediately that happened. And we were trying to think of a name for that the other week. I got some great recommendations. Someone said a gleaner or a gleamer. Someone said a fluffer because we love our porn analogies here. Fuck, there were loads of them. I'm going to have to go back and visit them, but they were good names. But stylistically favourable matchup nonetheless. I think it's quite interesting because Rob Font, decent hitter, but mainly known for his quality jab and like good all-round game, but one of the few guys using the jab intelligently. Stopped Thomas Almeida, which should tell you that he's legitimately dangerous on the feet and, legitimately educated on the feet because you're not, well, unless you're Cody Garbrandt, you're not going to just step in on Almeida and throw hands. He's too dangerous. I thought that Font did a really good job of using his jab to pull out reactions from Almeida and, firstly numb Almeida, who usually just wants to slip inside and throw an elbow or an overhand or something like that, numb his reactions by showing him feints, but also force his reactions by showing him convincing feints and then hitting him where his head goes. He was very good in that fight. Lost the fight to Rafael Assunção because Rafael Assunção has missed a spoiler at Bantamweight, and no one should take that fight. It's such a bad fight. You're going to lose, and it's not even going to be entertaining. And then he beat Sergio Pettis in the most recent one. However, it has been almost a year since he competed, because he was on a great little run in 2018, and I was all, Rob Font, he's the boy. Let's all get on the Rob Font hype train. Just been out of action since then. They booked him to fight Stamann and Lineker, and both of those fell through. Font versus Lineker would be a good one because you've got an educated boxer versus an overwhelming pressure fighter who's also got pretty educated feet of his own. But alas, now John Lineker is off smashing people you've never heard of in Asia. So I expect him to be considered one of the greatest of all time, like Demetrius Johnson, or Ben Askren when that was still going on. But what I like about this is that Ricky Simone does fight very square, but uses his head movement a lot and to set up counters and big punches and things like that. He is sort of there for the big punches from time to time. He's not infallible with his head movement, and he's not as elusive as I think he thinks he is. But he also tends to only really throw big punches, whereas Rob Font uses the jab a lot. So it could be the case that you get Rob Font just showing him the jab or flicking it in his eyes and making Simone duck onto uppercuts and knees and things. Or it could be the case that Rob Font's trying to pick him with the jab, and because Simone's so in love with his head movement, Simone's picking him off with counter punches and not really having to worry about the booming overhand right that Uriah Faber had. Yeah, you got a solid fatal four-way of boys in the centre of the card here. Then you got Thiago Alves versus Tim Means, which is just a couple of old boys. Tim Means always fun for his elbows, fun for his long southpaw left straight. Gave Jorge Masvidal some problems back at the lightweight. I look at Tim Means and I go, how the fuck did he make lightweight back in the day? But Thiago Alves, what's he on at the moment? Because he's, the problem is that he's not on anything. You look at the fucking pre-USADA pictures of Alves. I don't know who was kidding themselves. But, very technical striker, good fun to watch a lot of the time, but certainly getting more, slowing down a lot and getting more fragile, is what I'll say. Both in the sense of injuries, because he's been plagued by them through his recent career, and not taking the blows as well. And also, he just looks so small at welterweight now. It used to be that he was a huge, beefy dude, and we were going, how does he make welterweight? But, you look at him and GSP now, and back then we were like fucking enormous welterweights, and now almost everyone now this fights looks bigger than him. What else is going on? Nothing really exciting. Matt Wyman's coming back, which is nice because they threw him in at the deep end with, I suppose it was a deliberate decision to try and put some shine on Violent Bob Ross, but that was a horrible fight for Matt Wyman to come back straight into. So he's fighting Joe Solecki, who's making his UFC debut. Yeah, fun enough. There's also a one event going on tomorrow, but it's not good. There's not really anything going on it, and it's got a stupid name like all of them, and it's just getting so hard. Well, the reason they do the names is so that you don't know who's on them, basically. But KSW also has an event on, and they got Scott Askham fighting Mamed Khalidov. I thought that was going to be a title fight, but it seems to be a 3 5-minute rounder. Oh, it says here it's for 187. Maybe one of them had trouble making weight. Khalidov was KSW's middleweight champ and was on he had an incredible run as their middleweight champ. And then he went up to fight Thomas Narkun twice. First fight was really compelling and back and forth. Second fight was a little bit more decisive for Narkun. And Askham, he seems to be one of those guys who's improving himself since leaving the UFC. He had a fairly mixed run. I don't think he was ever finished in the UFC. Lost a split decision to Krzysztof Jotko. Lost a decision to Jack Hermansson, who, obviously went on to be a very serious contender. And then lost another split decision to Brad Scott on the way out the door. Askham was always a good fighter. Wasn't marked for greatness in any we weren't saying, oh my god, that guy's going to be a title contender, but I think he could still be comfortably competing in the UFC. And he has seemed to get better since he left. So, I just keep an eye on that one is what I'd say. Right, let's do a couple of questions and then we'll get out of here for today. Dear Jack, recently you spoke about pressure fighters and how it seems more and more fighters are adopting this style. Well, I've noticed that often fights can be decided based on who's pressuring and who's on the back foot. I've tried to think of how many fighters can fight off the back foot and I can only come up with 3 names. Joanna, Masvidal and Wonderboy. Based on this assumption, I want to ask you these questions. 1. Do you think it's MMA fighters' deficiency for not preparing for this scenario, or is it just hard to fight off the back foot in general? 2. If you were to coach someone that would face a pressure fighter, what would be your strategy? 3. Not related to the subject. Do you think the Lomachenko angles can be used in MMA? Are they more effective offensive or defensive? P.S. Sorry for my grammar mistakes. English is not my first language. That was pretty good. That was much better go than me in any other language. So well done there. And this is from Nobody, apparently. Capitalized, Nobody. Fucking Odysseus, back at it again. Do I think it's a general deficiency? I think ringcraft is a real deficiency that people have in MMA. I think that one of the interesting things is that, like, in boxing, you don't see an awful lot of guys working off the ropes because you're advised to not work off the ropes. You don't see a lot of guys doing. Think of Rocky Marciano versus Josie Joe Walcott. Walcott did eventually get caught along the ropes in like the 13th round, but through that fight he fought beautifully with his back on the ropes. But you don't see guys doing that in boxing gyms. It tends to be like if you're sparring with a much worse sparring partner, you might do it as a little bit of a test yourself or show off sort of thing. Whereas in MMA, guys are working against the fence every day. Fence wrestling is literally an everyday thing in most top-level gyms. Because it is basically, fence wrestling is MMA, and then everything else is just sort of like part of MMA. Or like an extra bit of trapping. But I think, it's tricky because a lot of academies don't have full-size gyms. It's pretty rare for a UK academy to have a full-size cage, like a UFC-sized cage. And remember that the UFC uses a larger cage than many of the smaller shows. And one of Jackson Wink's big investments was getting like 3 full-size cages. You know, you can watch Holly Holm and she really fucking knows where she is in the cage. You didn't put Holm in your fighting on the back foot thing. No, Holm is very good at knowing exactly where she is in the cage and circling out when she needs to. Though I suppose she doesn't really fight off the back foot, she just sort of runs around. But I think that's part of the thing, you know, if you're an amateur boxer, you work in the ring a lot, and you have one of the ways you can gauge it is your distance from the opposite ropes. You know how big the ring is because you work in it all the time, and you know by looking at the opposite ropes how far you are from the ropes behind you. And I think a lot of MMA fighters don't have any way to gauge how far they are from the ropes because you can't look down at the. I mean, you could maybe see the center logo in the mat out of your peripheral vision while you're backing up, but obviously the opponent's going to be occupying that space a lot of the time. But you can't really see the black line on the floor, which, you know, more and more guys are saying we train to stay inside of that black line, but you can't see it when you're working. So it's very tricky in that sense. But yes, generally it's just a deficiency. If you're a coach, if you were to coach someone facing a pressure fighter, what would your strategy be? Use weapons that are going to punish them for being aggressive, because a lot of pressure fighters are just aggressive fighters rather than using the pressure to cook you. So guys who are going to come in a little bit more recklessly or engage more willingly, don't try and punch them on the way in as much as you can, elbow and knee them, because those are things that the harder they push into you, the more they're going to hurt themselves. Unless, of course, you're dealing with someone who wants clinches, then you've got to be very careful about those short-range weapons, which, you know, you'll intercept them, you might cut them or wind them, but you've got to then dig underhooks immediately afterwards. If you're fighting someone who's consciously trying to get you to the cage to wrestle with you, I would say stick to the jab and keep it like that for a round, 2 rounds. You know, you don't need to, Holly Holm versus Ronda Rousey is a great example. She doesn't start throwing the left straight until she's already got Ronda's speed and timing, basically. You know, she's let her run at her a few times without any, like, firing back, just circling, getting the read on her, circling out, and then she goes, okay, now I'm a bit more comfortable. And also Ronda slowed down a bit, because you can't, dudes don't just run at you full pelt several times in a row. If it's failed already, you know, you have to slow down, and even if they don't know what they're going to do next, they'll stop and reconsider for a little bit. One of the ones that surprises me working off the back foot is the low kick. You know, Carlos Diego Ferreira versus, what's his name? Mayabek Taisimov. Or Taisimov Mayabek? I can't remember. But yeah, Taisimov used the low kick while retreating and actually had Ferreira in trouble in that first round. Also, framing and angling are the most important things there, but they're not really weapons. They're just what you should be doing. And they're not related to the subject. Lomachenko angles. I put out a little video on Lomachenko, a very brief Filthy Casual's guide to Lomachenko. And some of the stuff he does is incredible. He will hop both feet at once to retake the angle if you step down the outside of his lead foot. A lot of his angles are just regular angles done well, but all of that can be applied in MMA. You know, maybe not the hopping ones, but you know, footwork generally. Unless you're really putting yourself out of position and risking low kicks, breaking your stance when you do it, all of it can be applied in MMA. Right, I reckon that'll do us for today. If you want to get in on the Patreon, get all the extra content and support the podcast, so I can do it twice a week like I do, do that. If you want to send an email to the podcast, fightsgonbypodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing at any time, including the wicked preview I did to Andy Ruiz versus Anthony Joshua 2 this weekend, and I was one of the few who was giving Andy Ruiz a good shot the first time around, I'll have you know. If you want to read that, go to either Unibet or check thefightprimer.com. I'm your boy Jack Slack, waiting for the second coming of Stefan Struve's jab.